There is a moment in Season 5, at the very end of an episode called Rick Jack, where Rick Sanchez stands in a ruined hallway of the Citadel. He is staring at a wall of fire. His family is not with him. His best friend is in pieces in his garage. His wife has been dead for decades. His original daughter is in a grave in a dimension he cannot go back to. And in his hand is the only piece of a plan he has left. He looks at it and he says nothing, because there is nothing left to say. Most people who watch Rick and Morty think they are watching a comedy about a drunk scientist and his grandson. They are not. They are watching one of the darkest, most carefully hidden tragedies ever put into animation, and almost none of it is on the surface. Today, I'm going to show you what the show has actually been doing this whole time. Welcome to Ricktopus. Let us begin. The murder that started everything. Rick Prime, Diane, and the bombing. If you want to understand Rick Sanchez, you have to understand the night that broke him. Not the drinking, not the portal gun, not the Citadel. The night. One specific night in one specific house, when Rick was a young man with a wife and a daughter and a life that looked nothing like the life we meet him living. For 5 full seasons, the show hid this from us. It teased it. It faked us out. It showed us a version of it and then had Rick tell us directly that he made it up. Fans argued about it on Reddit for years. Some were sure the whole story was a lie. Some were sure parts of it were real. The writers watched all of this and kept their mouths shut. And then, at the end of Season 5, in an episode called Rick Jack, they finally let us see what actually happened. The fabricated backstory was not fabricated. It was almost entirely true. Rick had just been lying about the one part of it he could still pretend didn't hurt. So here is the story, the way the show itself now officially tells it. Rick Sanchez was a young scientist. He had a wife named Diane. He had a daughter named Beth, and she was little. The kind of little where she still ran up to her dad for a hug. The kind of little where she still thought her dad was the smartest and coolest person in the whole world. And Rick, at that point, was genuinely trying. He was working on teleportation. He was home. He was not yet the man who disappears for 20 years and shows up one day asking where the garage is. He was a father. Then, one day, another Rick showed up. This is the part of the story that takes a second to sit with, because the villain of Rick and Morty, the actual, canonical, confirmed main villain, the guy behind almost every bad thing that shaped Rick's life, is not some alien overlord or some evil corporation. It is another version of Rick himself. A Rick from a different dimension who had already figured out portal travel and had already left his own family behind. His name, the show eventually gave us, is Rick Prime. And Rick Prime knocked on our Rick's door that day with an offer. Come with me. Leave all of this behind. Travel the multiverse. Be something bigger than a husband and a father. Our Rick said no. That is the moment everything pivots on. Not the murder, the refusal. Rick looked at another version of himself, a colder, crueler version who thought family was a cage. And he said, I do not want what you are offering. I like my life. I like my wife. I like my little girl. I am staying. Rick Prime did not take that well. A short time later, Diane and young Beth were in the house. Our Rick was somewhere else, just for a few minutes. A bomb came through the wall, or through the air. The show has drawn it a couple of different ways, but the outcome is always the same. Diane and Beth were killed instantly. The house was destroyed. Rick came back to a pile of rubble and 2 bodies that had, minutes before, been his entire reason to be alive. And the show shows you this, not in a quick cutaway, not as a joke. It shows you a young Rick kneeling in the wreckage, holding the body of his daughter. And the silence of that moment is louder than anything in the rest of the series. There is no punchline. There is no sarcastic line. Just a man who has lost everything, looking at the thing he has lost. Here is where it gets darker. Rick Prime did not just do this to our Rick. In a Season 7 episode called Unmortrican, Rick Prime explains it himself. After killing our Rick's Diane, he realized other Ricks across the multiverse were also refusing his offer, also choosing their wives, also choosing their families. So Rick Prime built a weapon. He called it Too Cool to Have a Name. The other Ricks who came looking for him later called it the Omega Device. And what the Omega Device does is straightforward and horrible. It kills one specific person across every single reality in the entire multiverse, all at once. Rick Prime used it on Diane. Every Diane. Every version of her in every universe, everywhere, for all time. Gone. That is why, when the show eventually shows us other Ricks in other dimensions, none of them have Dianes either. She is dead in the Prime dimension where our Rick originally lived. She is dead in dimension C131, where the current Beth and Summer come from. She is dead everywhere. Rick Prime reached into infinity and erased a woman. This is the thing that turned our Rick into the Rick we know. After the bombing, our Rick did not become a hero. He did not become a wise wise, grieving widower. He fell apart. The show is careful about this part. It does not let him off the hook. For a long time after Diane and Beth died, Rick was just a drunk, a very sad, very smart, very drunk man alone in a ruined house. He had not invented the portal gun yet. That came later, and it came out of something ugly. He did not build the portal gun to explore the multiverse or to find wonder. He built it so he could hunt down the version of himself who had killed his family, and then he used it for years, maybe decades. In Rick Mirai Jack, the show gives you a montage, and this is one of the most important sequences in the entire series because it rewrites how you understand Rick. The montage shows Rick portal jumping from dimension to dimension, finding other Ricks and killing them. Not Rick Prime, other Ricks. He thought each one might be the right one. Each time he was wrong. Each time he killed another version of himself and moved on. The body count is not small. It is not dozens. It is hundreds, maybe thousands. A whole trail of dead Ricks across the multiverse, and none of them the one he actually wanted. The other Ricks figured out what was happening. They banded together. They tried to stop him. He killed them too. Eventually, there were so many Ricks who wanted him dead that the only way forward was to stop fighting. Our Rick and the surviving Ricks made a truce. Out of that truce came the Council of Ricks, and out of the Council of Ricks came the Citadel, the giant floating city full of alternate Ricks and Mortys that we see across the show. Our Rick helped build all of it. He helped wall off the part of the multiverse where Ricks are always the smartest person in the room, which is a whole other dark secret we are going to get to later. But here is the point. Rick built the Citadel, the portal gun, and everything else in his life on top of a grave. He told every Rick who asked that he was just looking for adventure. He was not. He was still hunting one specific man, and he could not find him. Year after year, dimension after dimension, he could not find the one Rick who had actually done it. So he gave up. Not in a peaceful way, not in a healed way. He gave up the way someone who has been running for too long finally collapses. He started drinking worse. He became the version of himself that his younger self would not have recognized. And then he did something strange. He went looking for a specific kind of dimension. He was looking for a universe where Diane was dead, but Beth was still alive. A universe where another Rick had abandoned his family and left a Beth behind. He found one. He crashed his ship into that Beth's garage, and he moved in. That Beth is the Beth we have known the whole time. The Beth who is married to Jerry. The Beth who has Morty and Summer. The Beth who drinks wine and operates on horses. That Beth is not our Rick's original daughter. His original daughter is buried in rubble in a dimension he cannot bring himself to go back to. This Beth is a daughter he chose, from a dimension where the original Rick had bailed on her and left her alone. He moved in partly because he was tired, and partly because, somewhere deep down, he thought Rick Prime might come for this family too, and then he could finally kill him. That is what the first 5 seasons of the show are sitting on top of. When Rick looks at Morty, he is looking at a grandson who is not technically his. When Rick looks at Beth, he is looking at a stand-in for a little girl who died holding her mother's hand. When Rick tells Morty that nothing matters, he is not telling the truth. He is telling the only lie that makes it possible for him to get out of bed. The show confirms this in another small, awful detail. In an episode called Solarix, we find out that at some point during those bad years, Rick built an artificial intelligence version of Diane. He installed it in his old, ruined house in the Prime Dimension. He made it sound like her. He made it call to him from the other room. And what does this AI Diane say? She reminds him that he failed her. She reminds him that her killer is still out there. She will not let him move on. She is the guilt machine he built for himself, and he kept it plugged in for years just so he would not forget. When Rick finally goes back to that house in the Solarix episode, he tells the AI that he is letting her go, that he has a new family now, and he has to stop. And even then, the AI pushes back. Even the memory of her wants him to keep hunting. Rick did eventually kill Rick Prime. That happened in Unmortican in Season 7, but the show does not let him win. When our Rick finally stands over the man who destroyed his life, with everything he has ever wanted sitting in front of him, he loses the final fight. It is evil Morty, of all people, who actually brings Rick Prime down, and our Rick just delivers the last hit. Rick Prime laughs at him while he dies, and when it is over, Rick C-137 stands there with the same blank, hollow stare Morty had back at the end of Rick Potion number 9. The face of someone who just learned that the thing they spent their whole life waiting for does not fix anything. Because that is the secret underneath the secret. Rick Prime is the villain of the show. He killed Diane. He killed young Beth. He killed every Diane everywhere. He made Rick into a drunk, a murderer, and a liar. But he did not, in the end, ruin Rick. Rick ruined Rick. Rick Prime lit the match. Rick spent the next 50 years of his life burning the rest of it down on purpose. And the show knows this. The final shot of Unmortricken is not triumphant. It is tired. Rick got what he wanted, and it was still not enough. And now he has to go back to a dimension full of people who are not really his family, in a house that is not really his house, with a grandson who thinks he is a grandfather and does not know any of this. The lie keeps going. The drinking keeps going. The adventures keep going. And underneath all of it, still, the grave. This is the wound at the center of Rick and Morty. Every nihilistic speech, every reckless plan, every time Rick tells Morty that nothing means anything, it is all coming from this. A man who loved his wife and daughter so much that, when they were taken from him, he decided it would be safer to pretend he had never loved anything at all. Nihilism, for Rick, is not a philosophy. It is painkiller. He takes it so he can keep functioning. And every so often, the show lets the painkiller wear off for a second, and we see what is underneath, and it is the worst thing in the show. __quote _0__. Which brings us to a question the show has been quietly asking since the very beginning, and which most people watching never thought to ask. If the Rick we know is a man who replaced his dead family with a new one, and if he walked into a dimension where another Rick had already abandoned that family, what happened to the original Morty? The one from the house Rick first crashed into, the one we thought, for the whole first season, was the only Morty that mattered. Because that is a story the show also told us, much earlier than Rick Mirai Jack. And when you know what we now know, that earlier story becomes something much darker than anyone realized at the time. Section 2. The original Morty is dead. Rick Potion number 9 and the buried body. There is a scene in season 1 that a lot of people remember as funny. Rick and Morty come home covered in dirt, shovels in their hands, and Morty goes inside and sits down on the couch with the most haunted look a cartoon has ever drawn. It gets used as a meme. It gets used as a reaction image. Most people who have never seen the show have still, at some point, seen that face. What most of those people do not know is what Morty just did to put that face on. He just buried his own body in the backyard. That sentence is not a metaphor. It is not an exaggeration. It is the actual, literal, canon event of the 6th episode of Rick and Morty, called Rick Potion number 9, which aired on January 27th, 2014. And it rewrote the rules of the entire show so completely that almost everything we have talked about in the previous section only makes sense because of what happens in this one. Let me walk you through it, because the order matters. The episode starts small. It starts stupid, honestly. Morty has a crush on a girl named Jessica. There's a school dance coming up. Morty wants Jessica to like him, so he goes to Rick, the way he always does, and he asks for help. And Rick, without thinking about it too hard, whips up a love potion. He hands it to Morty. He tells him to go spray it on Jessica, and she will fall in love with him. Already there is something off about this scene, and the show knows it. Rick even starts to warn Morty about one detail, that if Jessica happens to have the flu, the potion will do something bad. And then he decides not to bother telling him. He just hands the potion over. That is the whole setup. A careless grandfather gives a desperate young boy what is essentially a highly inappropriate substance, and then does not warn him about the one thing that could go wrong. Morty sprays Jessica. Jessica has the flu. The potion mixes with the virus, and the virus, unlike the potion, is airborne. Within minutes, every single person at the dance is in love with Morty. Within hours, every single person in the school. Within a day, every single person on Earth. Men, women, teachers, strangers, the entire planet. And it is not cute love, the way a normal love story shows love. It is obsessive, single-minded, lurching, mob love. Crowds of people pushing at the windows of his house, screaming his name, climbing over each other to get to him. Morty has accidentally made himself the only desirable thing on Earth, and everyone wants him at the same time. Rick shows up, annoyed, and tries to fix it. He makes another serum, this time with praying mantis genes mixed in, because praying mantises, after they mate, kill and eat their partners. Rick is hoping this will break the love obsession by replacing it with a survival instinct. What actually happens is that everyone on Earth, in addition to still being in love with Morty, now also wants to kill and eat him after they mate with him. The entire world is now a planet full of giant human praying mantises hunting a teenage boy. Rick makes a third serum. He mixes it together out of random pieces of DNA: koala, rattlesnake, chimp, cactus, golden retriever, shark, and dinosaur. He releases it. And this one does something even worse. It mutates every single human on Earth into a lumpy, deformed, flesh blob monster. Rick names them Cronenbergs, after a filmmaker who makes horror movies about bodies falling apart. Every single person on the planet is now one of these things. Every person except 3. Morty's dad, Jerry, his mom, mom Beth and his sister Summer, because they share enough DNA with Morty that the virus skipped over them. So now the Earth belongs to the Cronenbergs. Everyone Morty ever knew, every teacher, every friend, every kid from school, Jessica herself, all of them are now bubbling pink meat creatures that cannot speak and can barely move. This is the point at which Rick does something that the show, even 10 years later, has never fully walked back. Rick sits on a rooftop with Morty and tells him there is nothing to be done. He is not going to fix this. He says, out loud, that fixing it would be a lot of work and why bother. Instead, he says, they are going to leave. They are going to get up, go to the garage, and use his portal technology to find a different universe. A universe where this did not happen. A universe where he and Morty had done the same stupid thing, but their Rick had somehow fixed it, and then, conveniently, died shortly after. Because Rick explains, calmly, what the plan is. They are not going to find a version of reality where everything is fine and go live in it as guests. They are going to find a version of reality where a Rick and a Morty recently died, and they are going to take those dead people's places. They are going to climb into the lives of the two corpses and keep going as if nothing happened. Morty is horrified. He asks Rick what will happen to their original family, to the Beth and Jerry and Summer, who are now the only 3 normal humans on a planet full of monsters. Rick shrugs. He tells Morty not to think about it. He says there is nothing they can do for them, and then he fires up the portal. So they travel. They find a universe that matches the one Rick described. A Rick and a Morty who had fixed the Cronenberg problem, and then, minutes later, died in an accident. The dead Rick and Morty are lying in the backyard, bodies intact. Recently enough that they have not even been found yet, are Rick and Morty land. They look at the corpses, and Rick hands Morty a shovel. This is the scene. This is the scene everyone has seen, and most people do not realize what they are watching. A 13-year-old boy, dressed in yellow, digging a grave in his own backyard, and lowering his own dead body into it. He covers it with dirt. He pats the dirt down. The song playing over this is a song called Look On Down From the Bridge by Mazzy Star, a song that was originally written for grief, for ending, for the kind of sadness that does not have anywhere to go. Morty does not cry. Morty does not speak. He just finishes the job. Then he walks into the house, a house that is not his house, filled with family members who are not his family, who think he is their Morty because he looks like him. He sits down on the couch. He stares at nothing. The episode ends. Think about what that boy has just been asked to process. His original parents are still alive. They are still in the dimension he just left. They are living right now in a van, eating cooked Cronenberg meat to survive, waiting for a rescue that is never coming. Morty knows this. He saw them last. And he knows because Rick told him that there is no going back. He is not allowed to think about them. He is not allowed to miss them. He has been told by the one adult he trusts to shut up about it and sit on the couch. And the Beth and Jerry and Summer who are in this new house, these are not his. They look like his. They sound like his. They have the same first names and the same kitchen and the same dog, but they are not the people who raised him. They are strangers wearing his family's faces. And he has to pretend, starting right now, that they are not strangers. He has to hug his new mom when she hugs him. He has to eat dinner across the table from a father who is not the father who raised him. He has to go to school and see a Jessica who does not even know he exists yet because he is not the Morty who ever met her. Everything Morty thought was real, up until that episode, was ripped away from him. His school, his crush, his friends, his family, his house, his Earth, all of it is gone. And the replacement version of his life is a lie he has to perform every single day for the rest of the show. The show knows how heavy this is. The writers do not let you off the hook. In a later episode called Ricksty Minutes, which is only 2 episodes after Rick Potion number 9, Morty actually has to tell Summer about this. Summer is upset about something normal and teenage, and she is threatening to run away. And Morty, this 13-year-old boy who has been carrying this secret completely alone, walks her out to the backyard. He shows her the 2 graves. He explains calmly that those are the bodies of the Rick and Morty she has been living with for the last 2 weeks. That her real brother is dead, that her real grandfather is dead, that he has been watching her eat breakfast with strangers and pretending everything is fine. And the line he gives her is one of the most quietly devastating pieces of writing in the whole show. He tells her that nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody is going to die. He tells her that he buried his own body a few feet away from where they are standing, and then he went inside and watched TV. He is not being dramatic. He is telling her the actual facts of his life. This is where the show stops stops being the cartoon everyone thought they were watching. Up to this episode, Rick and Morty was a weird science fiction comedy with dark jokes. After this episode, it is something else. It is a show about a boy who is forced to carry a secret so big that no child should ever have to carry it, and a grandfather who loaded that secret onto him without asking, because fixing the actual problem was too much effort. Rick did not just destroy a planet, he destroyed his own grandson's sense that the world is real. He traded Morty's entire life for a slightly more convenient version, and he told Morty to be grateful about it, because at least they are alive. And the show never fully gives Morty a break from this. The original dimension does not go away. It sits there in the background for seasons. We check back in on it sometimes. The original Jerry and Beth and Summer survive in their armored van for a while. Summer from the original dimension eventually gets frozen to death by a team of other Ricks in season 3. Beth gets sick and dies from an infection. And Jerry, the original Jerry, Morty's actual father, the one who raised him from a baby, survives the longest. He stays alive in that dead world, hunting Cronenbergs for years. And then, in an episode called Solar Ricks at the start of season 6, the original Jerry is shot and killed by Rick Prime. So let that sit for a second. The same Rick who killed Diane and young Beth, who set this entire show in motion, is also the Rick who eventually kills the father of the original Morty. The original Morty whose body is in the backyard of the house we have been watching the whole time. The same villain closes both loops. And the show, which could have let us forget about any of this, keeps bringing it back. Cronenbergs show up in other episodes, wandering around. The original dimension gets called the Prime Dimension and gets its own name on the show's maps. The writers keep quietly reminding us here and there that the world we have been watching is a stolen world. That the family we have come to love is not the family Morty started with. That everything after season 1, episode 6 is happening on top of 2 buried bodies that nobody has ever dug up. Which is why the quiet little moments in this show hit so much harder than they should. When Morty hugs Beth, when Morty fights with Jerry, when Morty has dinner with Summer. The audience, most of the time, forgets. The show counts on that. It wants you to sink into the normalness of it, because the normalness is the horror. This is not Morty's family. It is the family he was issued when his real one was condemned. And Morty, by the way, never gets to grieve. He does not get a therapy episode about it. He does not get a big emotional scene where he cries about his old life. He gets the backyard, the song, the couch, and then the next episode begins and everyone moves on. That is the deal. That is how you survive in Rick's world. You bury what hurt you, literally if you have to, and you do not look back. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Which brings up a question the show has been hiding the answer to since that episode aired. Because if there is an entire city full of alternate Ricks and Mortys, a whole floating civilization of them, then somebody has been keeping track of who lives, who dies, and which versions get to count as real. And that city is not what you think it is. The Citadel looks, at first, like a safe place. A place where Ricks and Mortys can be themselves. But what is actually happening inside it is one of the most disturbing things the show has ever quietly revealed. And it is hidden inside a commercial for a cookie. Section 3. Simple Rick and the Wafer Factory. Industrial torture as comfort food. Somewhere on the Citadel, there is a room. The room is small. It has a single chair in it. Strapped into that chair is a man who looks exactly like the Rick we have been watching for the entire show. Except he is wearing a light blue shirt instead of the usual pale one, and his hair is a little softer, and his face is calmer than any Rick face has ever been. On his head is a helmet. Wires run from the helmet into machines in the walls. The machines hum. The man in the chair is smiling. He is crying a little bit. He is not awake, not really. He is locked inside a single memory, and the memory is playing on a loop behind his eyes. And every time the memory loops, the machines in the walls suck something out of his brain and pipe it into a factory next door. What the factory next door makes is a cookie. The cookie is called Simple Rick's Wafer, and every Rick on the Citadel eats them because there is nothing in the entire multiverse that tastes like these cookies taste. The advertising line for the cookie, the tagline that plays in the television ad inside the show, is "Come home to the impossible flavor of your own completion." And what the ad does not say out loud, but what the ad actually shows you, if you are paying attention, is that the impossible flavor is the chemical that gets released in a father's brain when his daughter runs up to hug him on her 3rd birthday. That is what is in the cookie. That is the whole product. The happiness a good dad feels when his kid says she loves him, extracted, liquefied, and poured into a wafer. And he is stuck in that moment forever, so the factory can keep going. This is Simple Rick. He gets his name because he was a Rick who made a different choice than most Ricks. The Citadel ad that explains his backstory spells this out in a tone tone that sounds warm and sweet, the way all commercials sound, which makes it about 10 times worse. Simple Rick, the narrator says, was the kind of Rick who was just as smart as all the other Ricks. He could have invented the portal gun. He could have traveled between worlds. He could have done anything the other Ricks did, but he did not want to. He liked working with wood instead of machines. He liked being home. He liked making a toy out of scraps in his garage and giving it to his little girl for her birthday. He liked watching her open it. He liked hearing her say, "I love Daddy." And when he heard that, he cried happy tears. That one moment, that one sentence from his daughter was the peak of his entire life, and somebody on the Citadel found out about him. The show does not spell out exactly how Simple Rick got there. The strong implication, based on who owns the factory and how he talks about Ricks, is that Simple Rick was kidnapped, taken from his home, taken from his daughter, taken from the life he was quietly happy in. They strapped him into a chair, they put the helmet on him. They found that one memory, little Beth running up, the present in her hands, the tears, the words, and they made it the only thing he will ever experience again. Every second of every day, for the rest of his life, he is back in that memory. He is smiling, he is crying, he is saying her name. And every time the memory hits its peak, the machine collects the chemical his brain releases, and a cookie comes out of the factory. He has been there for years. That is the product. That is the snack. That is what the Ricks of the Citadel eat on their break. The owner of the factory is a Rick named Rick Sanchez III. He wears a purple suit and a purple top hat and carries a gold cane. And the show dresses him this way on purpose because he is designed to look exactly like a famous character from a movie about a factory that made candy for children. The reference is not subtle. It is meant to make you feel sick. This is the man who bought the chocolate factory. Except in this version, the thing that makes the candy is not magic. It is a kidnapped human being locked in a dream of his own daughter. And Rick Sanchez III is not doing anything illegal on the Citadel. The factory is legal. The product is legal. The commercials run on TV. Ricks eat the cookies openly. This is not a secret crime. It is a public business. Everybody knows how the cookies are made, and everybody eats them anyway, because the flavor is too good to think about where it comes from. The show is doing something very specific with this. It is asking you to notice that the same people who mock caring about family, Ricks, who build their whole identity around being too smart for love, are also the customers standing in line to eat the brain juice of the one Rick who actually loved his family. They are not too smart for it. They are just too broken to have it themselves. So they buy it, in cookie form, from a machine. The episode this all comes from is called The Ricklantis Mix-Up, and it dropped in season 3. The title was hidden on purpose. The writers marketed the episode as a dumb trip to Atlantis story because they did not want anyone to know, going in, that this was actually the darkest single episode the show had ever put out. And the factory is only one of the stories inside it. The factory is, somehow, not even the worst thing that happens. But let me tell you what happens in the factory, because the plot of the factory section is the part that is most worth walking through step by step. There is another Rick in the factory. His name is Rick J22. He works on the assembly line. He packages the wafers. He has been doing this job for 15 years. He is not the owner. He is not a manager. He is a regular working guy. He has been passed over for a promotion, again, and he snaps. He grabs a portal gun from somewhere and he takes the factory hostage. He destroys his workstation. He kills his supervisor. And then he runs into the only room he is not supposed to be in, the room at the center of the factory, and he sees Simple Rick in the chair. For a second, Rick J22 understands something. He understands that everything the Citadel tells Ricks about themselves is a lie. That the Ricks, who are supposed to be the smartest beings in the universe, are actually trapped on an assembly line making cookies. That the product they are making is made out of a man like them. He grabs Simple Rick. He takes him hostage. He demands a working portal gun, untraceable, with enough fuel to escape. He tells the cops outside, through a megaphone, the only honest sentence anybody speaks in the entire episode. He says their lives are a lie. He says the Citadel told them they were special, and then stripped them of everything that ever made them unique. He is right, and the show lets him be right for exactly 1 minute. The cops, other Ricks wearing Citadel uniforms, hand him the portal gun. J22 takes it, and here is the moment that breaks you if you have been paying attention. J22 does not use the portal gun to escape himself. He uses it on Simple Rick first. He opens a portal to what he thinks is freedom, and he pushes Simple Rick through it because he wants to save him. He wants Simple Rick to get out. He wants the one Rick in this whole place who actually loved something to be free from the chair. The portal gun has been tampered with. The cops lied. They handed J22 a portal gun they had already hacked. The portal does not open to freedom. It opens to something called the Blender dimension, which is exactly what the name sounds sounds like. Simple Rick falls through the portal and is torn into shreds the instant he arrives on the other side. He dies in the middle of the rescue attempt. The person trying to save him is the person who accidentally kills him. J-22 sees it happen. And this is where the factory owner walks in. Rick D. Sanchez III enters the flavor core in his purple top hat, calm, with a smile, the way the villain in the Chocolate Factory movie would. He looks at J-22. He tells J-22 sweetly that J-22 was right, that the Citadel does treat regular Ricks like trash, that J-22 is a hero for standing up to the system. He praises him. He thanks him. He invites him to step forward and be recognized. J-22, who has just watched the only person he tried to save die in front of him, is overwhelmed. He has spent 15 years on the line. Nobody has ever told him he was special before. Tears well up in his eyes. His whole face goes soft. He feels, for the first time, the specific feeling of being seen. Rick D. Sanchez III stuns him. The next shot is of J-22 in a chair. The same chair Simple Rick was in. The same helmet on his head. The same wires running into the same walls. A new commercial starts playing, advertising a new version of the cookie called Simple Rick's Freedom Wafer Selects, and the narrator explains, in that same warm factory tour voice, that the factory has captured a new flavor. They are calling it the taste of shattering the grand illusion. What they mean is, they are harvesting the feeling J-22 had for 3 seconds right before he got stunned, the euphoria of believing, for one moment, that he mattered. And now the factory has 2 flavors. The first flavor is the love of a father for his daughter. The second flavor is the brief joy of a worker who thought he was going to be recognized as a hero. Both of these men are now in chairs, in the same building, for the rest of their lives, running on loops, feeding a cookie line. That is the business model. And look at what the show is doing, quietly, with this whole thing. The factory is a joke about industrial food. It is a joke about how companies take beautiful parts of human life and grind them up into products you can buy at a grocery store. It is a joke about advertising. It is a joke about workers. It is a joke about capitalism. But it is also, and this is the part most people miss, a direct commentary on the show itself. Because what does Rick and Morty, the show, do? It takes the real emotional pain of its characters, it packages that pain into 20-minute episodes, and it sells it to an audience who eats it up while they scroll their phones. The show is looking at the viewer through the wafer ad. It is asking, in its own sneaky way, whether the thing we are enjoying is really that different from what the Citadel is selling to its Ricks. The factory scene is also the first time the show tells us the phrase central finite curve. The ad for Simple Rick's wafers mentions in passing that Simple Rick is 16 iterations off the central finite curve. Nobody watching in 2017 knew what that meant. The show was planting a seed. It would not explain what the central finite curve was for 4 more seasons, but it mattered. It mattered enormously, as we are going to see later in this video. The factory commercial was not just a joke. It was a piece of information hidden inside a joke, which is how Rick and Morty hides almost all of its most important pieces of information. There is one other thing about Simple Rick that makes it worse the more you think about it. The memory he is stuck inside of. Little Beth's 3rd birthday. The wooden toy. The hug. The words, "I love Daddy." That memory is not made up. That is a memory a father actually had. Simple Rick actually lived through that moment. His little girl actually said that to him. He actually cried. And he actually built with his own hands a small wooden toy because he loved her. All of that is real. All of that happened. The Citadel found the one happiest day of a quiet man's life and turned it into a flavor. Then they strapped him into the machine that makes the flavor. And when he dies, they put a new Rick in his chair and give him a slightly different flavor to be stuck inside of. And the machine keeps going. And the commercials keep running. And the cookies keep selling. And the other Ricks on the Citadel, on their lunch breaks, pop a wafer in their mouths and say, yeah, that hits the spot. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And here is the thing the show wants you to feel on the way out of this episode. The factory is not the worst thing happening in the Citadel. The factory is just the part with a commercial. The rest of the Citadel is worse, because the rest of the Citadel is where all the Mortys live. And what the Citadel is doing to the Mortys every single day, without any of them even fully understanding it, is the kind of thing that only becomes clear when you see a brand new cop stepping off the elevator on his first day and an old cop rolling his eyes at him, and the two of them driving into a neighborhood the show has been hiding since season 1. Section 4. The Citadel is a class-divided hellscape. What Ricks do to Mortys. The Citadel, when we first see it in season 1, looks kind of fun. It is a floating city. It is full of Ricks and Mortys doing Rick and Morty stuff. There are different kinds of Ricks walking around. A cowboy Rick, a fat Rick, a doofus Rick, and there There are Mortys in little school uniforms being herded around in groups. The camera moves fast. The jokes come fast. The episode is a detective story about a Rick killer. You are not supposed to stop and look at the background. You are supposed to enjoy the ride. If you do stop and look at the background, though, the picture changes. The Ricks have nice clothes. The Mortys have matching yellow shirts. The Ricks are walking around freely. The Mortys are being walked. The Ricks are giving orders. The Mortys are following them. Every Rick you see has a job that requires brains. Lawyer, doctor, scientist, judge. Every Morty you see has a job that requires nothing. They are assistants. They are students. They are pets. They are walking next to a Rick, half a step behind, holding the Rick's coat. This is not an accident of how the city is drawn. This is the whole point of the city. And the show waited until season 3, episode 7, to fully explain what was going on in that background. The episode is the Ricklantis mix-up, the same episode that gave us Simple Rick and the Wafer Factory. But the factory is only one of 5 stories happening at the same time in that single 22-minute episode. The other 4 stories are all about what life is actually like on the Citadel if you happen to have been born a Morty instead of a Rick. Start with the schools. The episode takes us inside a Morty classroom. It is called Mortytown Elementary, or something like it. The show uses a bunch of slightly different names, and the teacher is a Rick. The kids are all Mortys. The lesson is straightforward. The teacher is explaining to a room full of boys, all of whom look the same, all of whom share the same first name, all of whom are roughly the same age, what their futures hold. And their futures, according to the lesson, are to be sidekicks. That is it. That is the whole curriculum. The school is not teaching the Mortys to be scientists or doctors or lawyers. The school is teaching them to be the person who stands next to a Rick, to hold the beaker, to carry the bag, to say, "Oh geez," when the Rick says something smart. The education system on the Citadel is designed, on purpose, to keep Mortys from becoming anything other than Morty. The reason is spelled out, eventually, by one of the Mortys himself. Ricks need a particular kind of brainwave to work correctly, a Morty brainwave, to cancel out the guilt waves that come off a Rick's brain when he does something horrible. Mortys are, in the words of the Citadel, brainwave cancellation devices. They're tools. Their whole job, from a Rick's point of view, is to walk next to the Rick and absorb the shame. The schools exist to turn little boys into tools, and the tools are taught to think of themselves as sidekicks, so that when a Rick takes them out into the multiverse and uses them up, the Morty does not realize he is being used. This is not a background detail. This is the structure of the society. Everything else on the Citadel is built on top of it. So when the episode takes us into Mortytown, the neighborhood where Mortys live when they do not have a Rick, you understand right away what Mortytown is. It is a ghetto. It is where the Mortys who fell off the conveyor belt end up. Mortys whose Ricks died. Mortys whose Ricks abandoned them. Mortys who ran away from their Ricks and have nowhere else to go. The show calls these Mortys Rickless, and everything in Mortytown is falling apart. The buildings are covered in graffiti. The streets are full of trash. Everyone is broke. There are gangs. There are drugs. There is a group called the Mortytown Locos, who are teenage Mortys in gang jackets selling illegal portal fluid on street corners. There are Mortys begging. There are Mortys in back alleys. There are Mortys sleeping on the sidewalks. Nobody in the Citadel's wealthy areas is going to help them. The Ricks are on the other side of town, drinking at their clubs. Mortytown is the place the Citadel pretends does not exist. And into Mortytown drives one of the saddest story threads in the entire show, the story of Cop Rick and Cop Morty. This part of the episode is a straight-up copy of an old police movie called Training Day, and the writers do not hide that at all. Cop Rick is brand new on the job. It is his first day. He is a fresh-faced, idealistic Rick, and the badge still shines for him. He thinks his job is to serve and protect. His partner, Cop Morty, is already corrupt. Cop Morty is a Morty in a cop uniform, which is already a strange thing to see because Mortys in the Citadel do not usually get to have real jobs. And Cop Morty has taken all the anger of being the one Morty who got a uniform and turned it inward. He hates other Mortys. He sees them as losers. He sees them as embarrassments. He has decided that the way to survive being a Morty in a city of Ricks is to become the hardest, cruelest, most Rick-like Morty he can possibly be, and to punish other Mortys for not doing the same. The two of them get a call about a drug lab in Mortytown. They drive out there, they find the lab, and inside the lab, there are Mortys. Just Mortys. A bunch of teenage Mortys. Probably addicts, probably dealers, probably kids who had nowhere else to go. Cop Rick is nervous. Cop Morty is not. Cop Morty walks around the building, looking at the faces of the Mortys on the floor, and then he walks outside. And then he presses a button. The building explodes. Every Morty inside is killed. Cop Rick is horrified. He screams at Cop Morty. He demands to know why. Cop Morty tells him those Mortys were going to be in the system forever. He tells him it is cheaper this way. He tells him that is how Mortytown works. And then the story gets worse. Because Cop Morty is not just taking bribes from the drug dealers. He has been taking bribes for a while. There is a Morty in Mortytown called Big Morty, who runs the neighborhood, and Big Morty has been paying Cop Morty off for years. Cop Morty has built his whole career on top of kickbacks from a Morty crime boss, and he is telling Cop Rick, the brand new cop, that this is normal, and that if he wants to survive on the force, he needs to take the money too. Cop Rick refuses. There is a shootout. Cop Rick gets shot in the head in front of Cop Morty. The idealist dies in the street, and the corrupt one lives. And that is the end of the Mortytown story. Nobody comes to investigate. There is no news report. There is no consequence. A Rick died, a Morty killed him, and the Citadel moves on. Because Rickless Mortys dying in a slum is not a story the Citadel tells. Meanwhile, somewhere else on the Citadel, there is a story about 4 little Mortys going on an adventure. This is maybe the darkest story in the entire episode. These are 4 kids from the Morty orphanage. The show actually calls it that, the Morty orphanage, which is an orphanage full of Mortys whose Ricks died or disappeared. One of them is a fat Morty, one is a lizard Morty, one is a normal Morty, and one is a Morty who talks like a cool older kid. The cool Morty tells the others he knows a secret. He knows about a place on the Citadel called the Wishing Portal. If you throw something important down the Wishing Portal, he says, your wish will come true. The 4 Mortys sneak out of the orphanage together. They travel across the city. They have a whole little adventure about what they each want. One of them wants 1,000,000 sandwiches. One of them wants to be cool. One of them wants to be loved. They walk for hours to get to the Wishing Portal. Together, all 4 of them holding whatever they brought to throw in. They reach the Wishing Portal. It is a giant green tunnel. They throw their sacrifices down into the dark. The fat Morty throws his panini maker. The lizard Morty throws his necklace. They wait. They close their eyes. They wish. The cool Morty, who told them about the portal, mumbles that he is sorry. Then the other 3 turn to ask him what he means, and the cool Morty pulls out a gun and shoots each of them in the head. He robs their bodies. He takes the little bit of money they had in their pockets, and then he walks away. The Wishing Portal, as he reveals in the last line, is just the garbage disposal for the whole Citadel. It is where trash goes. He brought them there to kill them for pocket change. That is a story about children in the Citadel. That is what happens to Mortys when no adult is looking. And while all of this is happening in the slums and the orphanage and the factory, while Ricks are dying in shootouts and children are being murdered for pennies and workers are being strapped into chairs to make cookies, the rich parts of the Citadel are holding an election. The old Council of Ricks, the group that used to rule the city, was destroyed at the start of Season 3 by our Rick. So the Citadel is democratic now. A real election with real candidates. And every single candidate who looks serious is a Rick. Business Rick, General Rick, Media Rick, one after another, they stand on stages and argue about tax policy and trade deals. The Mortys are allowed to vote, but no Morty is running, and no Rick expects them to bother. Except one Morty is running. A small, quiet, unremarkable-looking Morty in a gray suit. His campaign is a joke. Nobody takes it seriously. Not even the people working on his campaign take it seriously. His own campaign manager, Morty, spends most of the episode rolling his eyes at the whole idea. Why should anyone care? He is just a Morty. Then, this Morty, whose name is never given in the episode, walks onto the debate stage with the Rick candidates, and he does something nobody was expecting. He talks about Mortytown. He talks about the factories. He talks about the orphanage. He talks about the schools that teach Mortys to be sidekicks. He talks about the Mortys who died for no reason, and the Ricks who never noticed. And he says, out loud, in front of the entire Citadel, that the problem is not this Rick or that Rick. The problem is that Ricks run the city and Mortys are furniture. The crowd, which is made up of both Ricks and Mortys, goes silent, and then it erupts. The Mortys in the crowd start cheering. Ricks in the crowd start cheering too, because the speech is good, and some Ricks secretly know the system is broken and are relieved that somebody finally said it. Candidate Morty wins the debate. Overnight, he becomes the favorite to win the whole election. His own campaign manager, Morty, who had not believed in him at all, tries to apologize and get back in his good graces. Candidate Morty calmly fires him. A few hours later, the campaign manager gets handed a folder by an investigator Rick. The folder contains something. The show does not let us see what about candidate Morty's past. The campaign manager opens the folder. His face goes white. And in the last act of the election story, he tries to shoot candidate Morty at a rally and fails and is arrested and is then dragged into a side room where 2 Secret Service Ricks throw him out of an airlock into space. He dies floating. Candidate Morty wins the election. He becomes the first ever democratically elected president of the Citadel. He walks into the council chamber on Inauguration Day, smiling, the very picture of a young politician starting his new term, and then he raises one hand, casually, and snaps his fingers, and the Citadel's security forces gun down every single member of the council in the room around him. The blood sprays against the walls. The camera pulls back. A song starts playing. He sits down at the desk that used to belong to the Council of Ricks. He is in charge now. The song that plays over this moment is called For the Damaged Coda. It is slow, it is sad, it is beautiful. And it is the same exact song that played back in season 1, the first time we ever met a very particular Morty with an eye patch, whose existence the entire fan base has been arguing about for almost a decade. The show has been waiting for this moment since the first season. The song is not an accident. The Citadel did not just get a new president. The Citadel got the Morty it had been manufacturing in secret since the day it was built. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously, which means it is finally time to talk about him. Because the Morty who just took over the Citadel, the Morty who calmly executed his own campaign manager, the Morty who turned out to be the villain the show had been quietly threading through every season, he is not who most people think he is. His backstory is not what the fans guessed. His reason for doing all of this is not what anyone expected. And when the show finally tells us, in season 5, what he actually wants, it is going to reframe every single thing we have been talking about so far. Section 5. Evil Morty's true revelation. What he actually is, and why he's evil. For almost 10 years, the fan base was wrong about Evil Morty. Every forum thread, every YouTube video, every long Reddit post that tried to explain who he was and where he came from, almost all of it got the answer wrong. People were sure he was a Morty from a universe where Rick never left, or a Morty whose Rick abused him so badly that he snapped, or a clone, or a robot, or the original Morty, or Rick himself somehow in disguise. The theories got more and more detailed every year, and the show just sat there quietly, collecting all of them, and then in season 5, the writers walked on stage and said every single one of you missed the point. The truth about Evil Morty is not about where he came from. The truth is about what he wanted, and what he wanted was to leave. Let me walk this one through slowly, because the reveal only lands if you know where he started. The first time we see Evil Morty is in season 1, episode 10, called Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind. Rick and Morty are sitting at home. A team of other Ricks breaks down the door. They arrest our Rick. They accuse him of murdering 27 other Ricks across different dimensions. They drag him to the Citadel. Once he is there, the trial starts falling apart because somebody keeps killing the witnesses. An evil Rick in a grim leather jacket is slicing through Ricks and Mortys across the city. He has a headquarters. He has a torture chamber. He has a basement full of brainwashed Mortys with helmets on their heads, all of them hooked up to a machine that turns their Morty brainwaves into a shield. At the end of the episode, our Rick and Morty fight their way into evil Rick's lair. They beat him. The Ricks of the Citadel show up, free the hostage Mortys, and pat everyone on the back. A line of freed Mortys in yellow shirts walks past the camera, and the camera, almost as a joke, pauses on one Morty at the back of the line. He is wearing an eye patch. He looks at the camera. He keeps walking. Most people did not even notice him the first time they watched the episode. The show did not want them to. But the song that plays over that shot is For the Damaged, Coda, the same song the show will play over every major Evil Morty scene for the rest of the series, every time. The writers were planting a flag in the ground. They were telling anyone paying attention, this one matters. Remember his face. What was actually happening in that scene only became clear in season 5. Evil Rick was not the villain. Evil Rick was a puppet. The real villain was one of the Mortys in the basement, Evil Morty, who had a chip in his eye and had been using that chip to hack into Evil Rick's brain and drive him around like a car. Evil Morty let our Rick and Morty think they had won. He let Evil Rick take the fall. He let himself get herded into the freed hostage line. He walked out of that basement on foot with his eye patch on, one more face in a crowd, disappearing into the Citadel, because the Citadel was what he had come for. Skip forward 2 seasons. In the Ricklantis mix-up, the same episode we just talked about, Evil Morty has been on the Citadel for years, quietly. He has changed his look. He is wearing a suit now. He is running for president. And at the end of that episode, as we said, he wins, and he slaughters the Council of Ricks. For 4 more years, between that election and his next appearance, the show hid what he was doing up there. The writers let the fans guess. Then, Rick Mirai Jack came out, season 5 finale, and the show finally sat us down and told us what Evil Morty was actually building toward. He did not want revenge. He did not want to kill Rick. He did not want to take over the universe. He wanted out. Out of what? Here is where Rick Mirai Jack drops what is, honestly, one of the biggest ideas in the entire show. You have heard Rick say, throughout the series, that there are infinite dimensions, infinite universes, that anything is possible somewhere. This, it turns out, is only sort of true, because a long time ago, back in the early days after our Rick helped build the Citadel, the Ricks did something to the multiverse. They looked at all the infinite possible universes, every single one that exists, and they separated them into two groups. The universes where Rick Sanchez is the smartest person alive, and the universes where he is not. They built a wall between those two groups. They called the wall the Central Finite Curve, and they designed it so that every portal gun every Rick ever made can only travel inside the first group, inside the wall, inside the set of universes where Rick is king. Every Rick who portals to another dimension is portaling to another version of his own throne. Every Morty he takes with him is walking into another universe where his Rick is the brightest mind in the room. The whole multiverse that Ricks live inside of is a custom-built bubble designed to guarantee that Ricks never, ever have to deal with a place where they are not the smartest thing around. Evil Morty figured this out. He figured out that he was trapped inside a cage he had never been told about, that every Morty everywhere is trapped inside it, that the reason every Morty in existence has a Rick and gets dragged on adventures and gets talked down to and gets used as a shield is because the whole structure of their universe was designed on purpose to put a Rick on top. The speech Evil Morty gives in Rick Mirai Jack when he finally faces our Morty is probably the most important monologue in the show. He tells Morty directly that the reason he is called evil is not because he has done anything truly monstrous. It is because he is the Morty who stopped playing along. He says in so many words that every Morty who has ever been sick of Rick, every Morty who has ever been tired of the yelling, tired of the danger, tired of being treated like a pet, tired of being told nothing matters by a drunk old man who clearly cannot handle the fact that things do matter. Every one of those Mortys has been evil Morty for a second. The difference between him and every other Morty is that he did something about it. And what he did over years was to gather the tools. The Citadel has a machine called the Dimensional Drive, a very powerful engine built to move the entire floating city. Evil Morty realized that if he could overload the Dimensional Drive, he could punch a hole in the Central Finite Curve itself. He could break the wall. He could send himself through the wall. And on the other side was everything. Every universe the Ricks had cut themselves off from. Every reality where Rick is not special. Every possible version of existence that no Rick had ever set foot in. To overload the drive, he needed the schematics. And the only Rick who had ever built a portal gun from scratch was our Rick. So Evil Morty spent years positioning himself to capture our Rick and scan his brain. The plan we watched unfold in Rick Mirai Jack, the capture, the backstory reveal, the brain scan, was all one single move in a plan that had been running in the background of the whole show since season 1. And it worked. Evil Morty got the schematics. He overloaded the Dimensional Drive, the Citadel, the entire floating city, millions of Ricks and Mortys, the schools, the factories, Mortytown, the orphanage, all of it was destroyed in the explosion. And Evil Morty stood in the middle of it as the ground fell away, and he opened a portal. And his portal was not green like every Rick's portal ever has been. It was gold, because it was not going through the wall. It was going beyond the wall. He walked out of the wreckage of the Citadel. He walked through the hole in the Central Finite Curve. He walked into the actual, real, infinite multiverse. And for the first time in the entire run of the show, a character was somewhere a Rick could not follow. That is the Evil Morty story. He is not a supervillain. He is not even really evil. He is a 13-year-old boy who figured out his grandfather had built a prison around the entire universe to protect his own ego. And he broke out of it. And the show is very careful to make you notice something about his final speech. Evil Morty is not hiding what he did. He killed the campaign manager. He killed the Council of Ricks. He destroyed the Citadel. He knows he is the bad guy in this story. But when Morty tries to call him evil, Evil Morty pushes back. He tells Morty that the only reason he is called evil is because Ricks are writing the story. In any other story, he is the hero. He is the one who broke the system. He is the one who freed himself. He is the one who said no. Ricks see themselves as underdogs, he says, and that is how they justify every awful thing they do, by pretending the universe is against them when they are, in fact, the ones in charge of the universe. A Morty who notices this is inconvenient. A Morty who does something about it is unforgivable. That is the only thing that makes Evil Morty evil. He stopped being useful. And the show, underneath its jokes, agrees with him. Here's the detail that is easy to miss. When Evil Morty makes his escape, his portal gun is gold. Every other portal gun in the show has been green. Green was the color of portals to universes where a Rick was in charge. Gold is the color of a portal that goes somewhere else. The show quietly deliberately changes the color palette of its own universe to show you that the rules have changed. There is now a Morty out there with a portal gun that can go places our Rick cannot. In Season 7, in an episode called Unmortricken, we see evil Morty again. He is not plotting anything. He is not planning a war. He is living in a space mansion on the other side of the central finite curve, collecting rare art and cooking fancy meals and reading books, because that is what he wanted the whole time. He did not want power. He wanted a place to live where nobody was going to show up in his garage and drag him into a space adventure. He got it. And when our Rick and Morty track him down, he is annoyed that they have interrupted his dinner. That is the end point of evil Morty's entire arc. He wanted quiet. He wanted to be left alone. He wanted to be somewhere a Rick could not find him. And when he finally, reluctantly, helps our Rick kill Rick Prime, which he does as a favor, just to get them to go away, he leaves with the Omega device, the weapon Rick Prime used to kill every Diane in the multiverse, in his pocket. Think about that for a moment. The most dangerous weapon in the entire show is now in the hands of a 13-year-old boy who lives outside the rules of the show, who has a gold portal gun, and who has made it very clear that he does not want to be bothered. Whatever the end game of Rick and Morty eventually turns out to be, evil Morty is the one who is holding the actual most important object in the whole universe, and he is using it as a paperweight. The show is also very clear about what kind of person evil Morty is when he is not being attacked. He is calm, he is polite, he is a little bit condescending in the way smart people are when they are tired. He is not cackling, he is not monologuing about world domination, he is sitting down to eat. The thing the show seems to be saying, the more you sit with it, is that the real villain of Rick and Morty was never a Morty at all. The real villain was the system that Rick's built to trap every Morty inside their story. Evil Morty is just the first character who saw the trap clearly and got out. The Citadel was not destroyed by a criminal. It was destroyed by a kid who realized he was in one. And this is where the whole show tilts, because once you have seen evil Morty's escape, you cannot unsee the thing he was escaping from. Every Morty who has ever been on screen, everyone in the classroom, everyone in the orphanage, everyone lying dead in that wishing portal, they were all living inside the same walls. And our Morty, the one we have been watching the whole series, was also living inside those same walls. The boy on the couch who buried his own body, the boy on the spaceship who keeps getting yelled at, the boy in the hallway at school who cannot get a girl to notice him. He has been inside the cage this whole time. He just does not know it. Evil Morty is, in a strange way, the hopeful story in the show. He is the proof that a Morty can get out. __quote _4 ___. But getting out of the cage is only one way to become dangerous. There is another way, and the show gives us a different character for this one. A character who is not trapped by a system, but by her own childhood. Because while Rick was off building walls around the multiverse, he was also, at home, in his garage, quietly raising a little girl. And what he did to her while he was raising her, in one specific pocket of space he built for her with his own hands, is one of the most disturbing things the show has ever pulled out of its back pocket. Section 6. Beth was a child psychopath, and Fruppyland was the cage. Beth Smith, on the surface, is the most put-together member of the family. She is a horse surgeon. She has a job. She has a kitchen. She drinks wine on a weeknight. She yells at Jerry. She worries about her kids. She is, for most of the show's run, the grown-up in the room. When Rick does something reckless and Morty gets hurt, Beth is the one who is supposed to react. When Jerry does something stupid and the kids roll their eyes, Beth is the one who signs the permission slips and packs the lunches and keeps the lights on. She is the load-bearing adult of the Smith household. The show treats her that way. The other characters treat her that way. She has earned, across 6 seasons of television, the audience's assumption that she is the stable one. Then came Season 3, Episode 9. The episode is called The ABCs of Beth. And the show, across 22 minutes, very calmly tore that assumption into pieces on the floor. The episode starts with a news report on television. A man named Joseph Lipnip is about to be put to death that night. He was convicted, many years ago, of murdering and eating his own son, a little boy named Tommy. The case was famous, apparently. Beth remembers it. Tommy was her friend from childhood. They used to play together. And Beth, watching the news, starts telling her family how, when Tommy disappeared all those years ago, her little kid brain dealt with it by making up an imaginary world she pretended Tommy had gotten lost in. A happy, colorful, fake place where he was still alive. A place she made up in her head as a coping mechanism. She called it Fruppyland. Beth laughs about this. She says it is a silly, childish name. It is the kind of thing you remember from being 8 years old and cringe at. And Rick, sitting on the couch, is insulted. Because Fruppyland, Rick says, was not a made-up place. He built it. He built it with his own hands, as a real, physical, scientific pocket dimension when Beth was a child. She used to go there. It was real. It is still there. If Fruppyland is real, Beth realizes, then Tommy is not dead. Tommy is still in there. His father has been about to be killed for a murder that never happened. So Beth forces Rick to open the door. She packs a bag. They go in. What they find inside Fruppyland is where the episode starts being something other than an adventure. Fruppyland, when you first see it, looks like a children's storybook come to life. The sky is always sunny. The clouds are soft pink. The rivers are literal rainbows that you can breathe underwater in. The ground is bouncy, so nothing a child does in there can hurt them. There are cute animals made of marshmallow fluff who wander around and talk to you. It is, visibly, the safest place ever constructed. Rick made it that way on purpose. Every single thing in the dimension was designed to be child-proof. A kid cannot drown, cannot fall, cannot break a bone, cannot get hurt. It is a dream. And here is the first piece of the darkness, given casually, almost as a side comment from Rick, early in the episode. Rick did not build Fruppyland because he loved Beth. He built it to keep her away from the other kids in the neighborhood. Because Beth, as a little girl, had a problem. She kept coming to Rick and asking him to build her things. Not toys. Exactly. Tools. She wanted a switchblade that could fit in her pocket. She wanted duct tape in colors so bright and pretty that a kid would touch it without thinking. She wanted a small hammer she could carry around. And Rick, a scientist who will build anything for anyone who asks, kept quietly making these things for her. He shows Beth, in one scene of the episode, a whole box of these items he kept from her childhood. A pink talking switchblade, a rainbow roll of tape, and other devices Rick does not fully describe. Rick tells Beth she was, in his own words, a scary kid. The kind of kid who would ask her dad to build her a weapon and then be visibly excited about the idea of using it on specific other children in the neighborhood. A kid who would describe in detail what she wanted to do with each tool. A kid who bragged about the kinds of things she got away with. And Rick, instead of doing what a normal parent would do, which is sit his daughter down and talk to her, or take her to a doctor, or do any kind of actual parenting, decided the easier solution was to build her an entire separate universe and let her go play in there until she calmed down. He was not protecting her from the outside world. He was protecting the outside world from her. Fruppyland, from the moment Rick opened it, was designed with one rule. Nothing inside it could be permanently hurt. If Beth wanted to attack a cloud animal with her pink switchblade, the cloud animal would heal back up in a second. The duct tape would not actually trap anything. The hammer would not actually break anything. Rick had built her a padded playpen with unlimited targets so she could get her impulses out of her system without any real bodies piling up. It was the equivalent of handing an angry child a video game where the violence does not mean anything, except the child is not playing a game. The child is practicing. That is what Fruppyland really is. Once you know this, the whole bright, cheerful visual of the place changes. It is not a gift. It is a containment unit. And it is the place where Beth, at around 10 years old, decided to take her friend Tommy. The show gives us the full story in bits and pieces across the episode. Tommy's family had more money than Beth's. Tommy's father loved him. Tommy had a Nintendo. Tommy's parents paid attention to him. And Beth, watching this, wanted what Tommy had. She was jealous of him. She was jealous of his dad. She was jealous of his toys. She was jealous of the simple fact that he had a parent who seemed to actually like him. So one day she took him to Fruppyland. She brought him through the door Rick had made for her. She showed him around. And at some point, in the middle of their playdate, she pushed him into a swamp of honey. And she walked out of Fruppyland. And she closed the door behind her. And she did not tell anyone. And she went back to her life. Tommy was 10 years old. He was still 10 years old when the door closed behind him. And now, at the time of this episode, decades have passed. His father is about to be killed for a murder that never happened, for the body of a son who is not dead. Beth and Rick walk through Fruppyland looking for him. What they find is not cute. The animals have changed. They are bigger now. Their teeth are sharper. Their eyes are wrong. Something in the ecosystem has twisted. A giant bird creature attacks Rick and tears his arm off, which is supposed to be impossible. Nothing in Fruppyland is supposed to be able to hurt a human. Rick figures out why it can. The creatures now have human DNA in them, which means somewhere in Fruppyland, a human has been having children with the animals. Rick and Beth reach the castle at the center of the dimension, and the castle is Tommy's. Tommy is still alive. He is middle-aged now. He has spent almost his entire life inside this pocket universe. He survived the fall into the honey swamp, and then he survived the long years after, alone, as a child, in a place with no other humans. And the way he survived, the episode tells us, is exactly as dark as the word survived can possibly be. He had children with the cloud animals. When he was hungry, he ate those children. Some of the children he did not eat grew up. He had children with those children. Those children worshipped him as a god. The ones he did not want to eat, he kept around as court. The ones he did want to eat, he ate. An entire medieval society had grown up in Fruppyland, built on cannibalism and family members using each other for food and for sex, and Tommy was the king of it. He had been surviving this way for decades because there was nothing else to eat, and there was nothing else to do, and he was 10 when he got trapped in there with nothing but his instincts and a world that refused to let him die from his wounds. Rick and Beth are horrified. They are also, because this is Rick and Morty, watching a children's stage play performed by Tommy's Cloud People grandchildren that dramatizes all of this in cheerful singing voices. The play is how we find out the rest of the story. The Cloud kids act out in little costumes how Grandpa Tommy arrived in the world, how Grandpa Tommy was betrayed by a little girl, how Grandpa Tommy was trapped forever. The play names Beth by name as the villain, and Beth watches her own crime get performed for her by the great-great-grandchildren of her childhood friend, and Beth denies it. She tells Rick she did not trap Tommy. She tells Rick the play got it wrong. She is lying. You can see it on her face. She knows she did it. She is an adult now, and she knows the play is true, and she still cannot bring herself to say the words out loud. Rick shrugs, the way he always shrugs, and tells her there is no point arguing with the play. He pulls her out of the throne room. He tells her they should go. Beth insists on going back. She insists on talking to Tommy, grown-up Tommy, the actual man. She is going to make this right, she says. She is going to apologize and save him. But when she walks back in, she does not apologize. She cannot do it. Tommy tells her that she owes him an apology, one single apology, for closing the door on him when he was a child. And Beth looks at him and opens her mouth, and something inside her closes. She will not say the words. She cannot say them. And when Tommy refuses to leave without the apology and calls for his followers to attack her, Beth, who brought all of her father's childhood weapons with her in a bag, goes into a fury. She kills Tommy. She kills his children. She kills his grandchildren. The screen turns into a cartoon massacre, and Beth walks out of that throne room covered in cloud blood, and she has still not apologized. The only reason she came out of Fruppyland with any part of Tommy at all is that she thought to grab a severed finger before leaving. Back in the garage, Rick uses the finger to grow a full adult clone of Tommy. They race the clone to the prison. They hand him to the guards just before the execution button is pressed. Tommy's father sees his son. The execution is called off. A man is saved from being killed for a crime that did happen, technically, except the killer was the daughter of the scientist who let her have a pocket dimension to play in. Rick and Beth drive home together. And in the garage, Rick sits her down and tells her something that is supposed to be a kindness and is actually the darkest offer the show has ever put on the table. Rick tells Beth that he can see she is unhappy. He tells her he understands, and he offers her a choice. He can build a perfect clone of her, a Beth who looks exactly like her, who thinks like her, who has all her memories, who will go to work at the horse hospital and kiss Jerry at night and tuck Morty and Summer in and love them. And the real Beth can leave. She can go anywhere she wants, travel the galaxy, become a different person, start over. The clone will take over her life, and nobody will know. Her kids will never know. Her husband will never know. Beth considers the offer. The episode ends before we find out what she decided. This is the thing the show never lets you fully close the door on. At the end of the ABCs of Beth, Beth walks out of the garage. In the next episode, Beth is at home helping the family. We do not know if she took the deal. Rick, the next time we see him, insists she did not. Rick also lies constantly. And 2 full seasons later, another Beth shows up from space, claiming to be the original, accusing the Earth Beth of being the clone. Our Rick, when asked directly, says he designed the cloning process so that even he could not tell which one was the clone. He says he flipped a coin and then wiped the memory of the result from his own brain. Which means the Beth on screen, for the entire show, may not be Beth at all. The show's most emotionally grounded adult, the mother of our main character, the one stable point the Smith family orbits, might be a stand-in, might be a forgery her father built in his garage, might have been sent home with Morty and Summer as a substitute because the real Beth was too tired of her own life to keep living it. And that means every hug she has given Morty, every fight she has had with Jerry, every time she has yelled at Rick. Every tender moment, every breakfast, every good night, all of it possibly a performance by a machine. And the person we thought she was, the real Beth, might be somewhere very far from Earth, living a life none of us has ever seen, free from all of it. The Fruppyland episode did not just tell us Beth was dangerous as a child. It told us she learned very early that the way to deal with the parts of herself she could not face was to lock them behind a door and pretend the door was not there. Fruppyland is a door. The memory of Tommy is a door. The question of whether she took Rick's deal is a door. And the scary thing about Beth is that she knows, better than anybody, how to walk away from a door and never look back. __quote_5__. Which brings us to the other door in the Smith family. Because Beth is not the only character the show has quietly split into two versions of herself, and she is not the only character whose family might be living with a fake. There is a whole episode the show made, an entire, specific, chaotic half hour of television, where Rick's paranoia about keeping his family safe accidentally becomes the scariest thing that ever happened to them. And by the end of that episode, you will have no idea which Smiths, if any, you have been watching. Section 7. The Beth Clone. Ambiguity. Is the show's Beth even real? There is a thing that happens in long-running shows that fans have a name for. They call it a retcon. It is when a writer goes back and changes something that already happened in the story so that it means something different than it used to. Most of the time, when a show does this, the fans get annoyed because it feels like a cheat. The writer changed the rules after the game was already being played. Rick and Morty did something stranger than a retcon in season 4. It did not change what had already happened. It changed what might be happening right now. It changed it for every episode going forward. And it did this in a way that the show itself, the writers, the characters, and the audience cannot undo. Because the whole trick of it is that nobody, not even the show, knows the answer anymore. The trick was simple, and it landed in the season 4 finale, an episode called Star Mort, Rick Turn of the Jerry. This episode is the end of a storyline that had been building since Beth's conversation with Rick at the end of the ABCs of Beth, the Fruppyland episode we just covered. At the end of that earlier episode, Rick had offered Beth the deal. He had told her, very calmly, that he could build a perfect clone of her, identical in every way, memories and habits and all, so that she could leave her life and go anywhere in the galaxy she wanted. The show cut to black before she gave her answer. For almost 2 full seasons after that, the show pretended the deal did not matter. Beth kept showing up in episodes. She kept being Beth. She drank, she worked at the horse hospital, she fought with Jerry, she was a mother, and every once in a while, usually at a weird angle, Rick would mention, just in passing, that Beth was definitely not a clone. He said it a little too quickly. He said it a little too often. He said it in the way people say things when they are trying to make sure you stop asking. Viewers kept asking. The question sat in the background, unanswered for years. Then the season 4 finale happened, and a woman in a space uniform crashed through a wall of the garage carrying guns. She looked exactly like Beth, because she was Beth. She was a second Beth, a full-grown, adult, identical Beth, armed to the teeth, who had apparently been off in outer space fighting wars against the Galactic Federation for years. She was angry. She had come home to kill Rick, and what she told our Rick with her gun pointed at his head was that she had finally figured out the truth. Years ago, she had taken his deal. She had let him make a clone. She had gone off to space. And the Beth who had been living on Earth this entire time was the copy, the fake, the one Rick made in the garage. Our Beth, the one we have been watching for the whole show, walks into the garage in the middle of this. She hears what Space Beth is saying. She looks at Space Beth. Space Beth looks at her. And the two Beths, standing across a garage from each other, do the thing nobody in the show had expected them to do. They start arguing about which one of them is the real one. Because here is the detail that tips the whole thing into nightmare. The Space Beth does not actually know if she is the original. She only knows she was the one who went to space. And our Beth, on Earth, does not know if she is the original either. She only knows she stayed. And when Rick finally speaks, when the two women demand he tell them, right now, which one is the clone and which one is the real Beth, Rick admits something he had been hiding this whole time. He tells them he does not know. And he tells them that he set it up that way on purpose. The story Rick gives them in that scene goes like this. When Beth agreed to the deal, Rick built the clone. Then, when the clone and the real Beth were both ready, one to stay home, one to leave, Rick realized he did not want to carry the knowledge of which one was which. He did not want to be the only person in the multiverse who knew that the Beth on his couch was a forgery. That would be a weight he did not want to hold. So, he flipped a coin, basically. He let chance decide which one went where. And then, so that he could would not slip up and tell anyone, so that he would never have to look his own daughter in the eye, knowing she was the copy. He erased the result from his own memory. He does not know. He made sure he would never know. Both Beths are standing in front of him. One of them is his real daughter. One of them is a machine he built in the garage, and he cannot tell you which. He cannot tell them either. He cannot even tell himself. This is the trick the show played. And it is worth pausing for a second, because once you really sit with it, the entire emotional structure of Rick and Morty bends. Think about what this means for every single scene Beth has been in. Every time Beth has hugged Morty. Every time Beth has been worried about Summer. Every time Beth has had a fight with Jerry about something small. Every time she has poured a glass of wine and sat on the porch. Every time she has been a daughter to Rick. Every single one of those moments, going back to the ABCs of Beth in season 3, might be a clone going through the motions. The real Beth might have been in outer space the whole time. Morty might have been raised from his teenage years onward by a machine in the shape of his mother. Summer might have been going to her mom for advice and getting it from a copy. Jerry might have been in a marriage with a woman who was built to love him and does not technically count as his wife in any real sense. Or none of that might be true. The one on the couch might be the real one. There is no way to know. And the show, to its credit, does not blink at what it has just done. It does not walk the reveal back. It does not give the audience a safe answer. It does not let Rick secretly know the truth. It does not let the two Beths run some clever test to figure it out. It just lets the question hang there forever. In fact, the episode does something weirder. At the end of the finale, after the two Beths have worked together to fight off a Federation attack, they make peace with each other. They decide, together, that it does not actually matter which one is the original. They both have memories, they both have lives, they both feel like themselves, and they agree to coexist. The Earth Beth goes back to her family and her job. The Space Beth goes back to her rebel ship and her crew. And both of them, from that point on, exist in the show at the same time. Both of them are called Beth. Both of them are treated by everyone else in the family as a real Beth. Both of them get to be in the story. And that agreement between the two Beths is a beautiful thing on the surface. It is the show saying that identity is not about where you came from, that a person is a person because of what they do and who they love, not because of whether they were born or grown in a lab. It is a sincerely lovely ending to the Beth arc, if you read it that way. But if you read it another way, it is one of the most disturbing things the show has ever shown you. Because underneath that agreement is the fact that neither woman can actually stand the thought of being the clone. Neither of them wants the answer. Neither of them wants to know. They make peace with each other because the alternative is one of them having to accept that she is not real, and both of them would rather share the name Beth than risk being the one who does not get to keep it. Jerry, during this entire episode, is around the edges of the scene. He is doing Jerry things. He is making dumb jokes. He is trying to help in ways that do not quite work. And at the end, when both Beths agree to coexist, Jerry asks a question that is, for Jerry, a really big question. He asks which one of them is his wife. The Beths do not really answer him. The show does not really answer him either. There is one line later where Earthbeth and Jerry sort of reaffirm that they are together, and she is the one he will stay with, and Space Beth is fine with that. But Jerry, a man who genuinely loves his wife in his own broken way, never gets told whether the woman he sleeps next to every night is the actual Beth he married. He just keeps sleeping next to her, and the show keeps moving, and nobody brings it up again. The Beth clone question is, in a way, the loudest, quiet thing in the show. It is almost never mentioned after the season 4 finale. The two Beths do show up again later, and they have a pretty good relationship. They team up on missions, but the fundamental question, which one is the person the audience has been bonded with since season 1, never gets resolved. It just stays open forever. And here is what makes it especially heavy when you line it up with everything else the show has told us. We already know the Morty on the show is not the original. The original Morty's body is buried in the backyard of a Cronenberg-infested Earth. The show's current Morty came from Dimension C-131. We know, from Rick Jack, that the Rick on the show is not this family's original Rick either. The original Rick of this dimension abandoned this Beth when she was young. Our Rick walked into her life after losing his own Diane and original Beth. So he is a substitute grandfather raising a substitute grandson. And now, on top of that, we have the possibility that the mother of the house, the one supposedly stable anchor in the middle of all this, might also be a substitute, a grown-in-the-garage copy of a daughter who took off for space the moment she got the chance. That means the entire Smith family, possibly, is a collection of forgeries. A Rick who is not this family's Rick. A Morty who is not from this earth, a Beth who might be a clone, a Jerry who is in a marriage that may not technically be the marriage he thinks it is. The kids watch the adults love the kids. Meals get cooked, birthdays get celebrated, arguments get had, and underneath all of it, not one of them, except maybe Summer, is provably in the life they started in. What keeps the Smith household together is not biology, it is not continuity, it is the shared decision among 4 people to pretend the questions do not matter, to not ask, to not check, to let the dinners keep happening, to let the love count even if the paperwork on the love is suspicious. And that decision, taken seriously, is a kind of mercy, but it is also a kind of denial. It is the same denial the show keeps asking every member of the family to live inside. Morty denies that the real Morty is in the ground. Rick denies that the real Beth died in a bombing. Beth denies that she left, or stayed, or both. Jerry denies that his wife might not be his wife, and each of them, in their own way, has decided that the lie is more livable than the answer. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the Smith family is not the only group in this show that has been quietly replaced by copies. There is one specific episode where the question of who is real and who is a stand-in stops being philosophical, stops being about a single person, and becomes a full-blown siege. An episode where the house itself, this exact same house, this exact same kitchen, this exact same dinner table, gets multiplied across the country, and the people inside it start killing each other to prove they are the originals. And by the time that episode ends, the show has quietly admitted that even it is not sure who made it out alive. Section 8. Bird Person's complete destruction. Murdered at his own wedding, resurrected as a cyborg prisoner. Rick Sanchez does not have friends. He has a grandson he drags on missions. He has a family he lives with. He has drinking buddies he insults. He has enemies across the multiverse he has personally earned. But friends, in the way normal people understand the word, people he actually likes, people he chooses to spend time with for no reason, people whose company makes him happy, Rick does not have them. Across 8 seasons of television, the show has made this very clear. Rick is alone, on purpose, and he has built his whole personality around pretending that being alone is a choice he feels good about. There is one exception, one single person in the entire run of the show that Rick Sanchez treated like an actual friend. His name was Bird Person. Bird Person was not a character the show ever spent a huge amount of screen time on. He shows up in maybe a dozen episodes across the series, but every time he is on screen, the show makes sure you understand that this is not a throwaway guest character. This is Rick's oldest, closest, most important connection. They fought in wars together. They were in a band together back when they were young, a band called the Flesh Curtains that Rick still has pictures of on the wall. They lived through things together. They saved each other's lives. And when Bird Person speaks, Rick, who interrupts absolutely everybody, goes quiet and listens. There is one detail about Bird Person that tells you the whole relationship. Rick's catchphrase for seasons was the nonsense-sounding line, "Wubba lubba dub dub." He says it when he is pretending to be happy. He says it to Morty. He says it on adventures. It sounds like a silly cartoon noise, harmless, playful. In season 1, Bird Person quietly pulls Morty aside and tells him that this phrase, in Bird Person's native language, actually means something. It means, "I am in great pain. Please help me." Rick has been walking around the show screaming a cry for help disguised as a joke, and the only person in the entire universe who understood what he was actually saying was the bird-shaped man he met decades ago in a war. That is the relationship. That is what Bird Person meant to Rick. Now let me tell you what the show did to him. In season 2, Bird Person fell in love. Her name was Tammy. She was a teenage girl, Summer's friend from school, in fact. She first appeared at one of Rick's parties back in season 1. She had a thing for Bird Person from the second she saw him. The two of them got together, which was already weird because she was a high school kid and he was a seasoned war veteran from another planet. But Bird Person seemed happy. Rick seemed, for him, almost supportive of it. And over the course of season 2, the relationship got serious. At the end of season 2, Bird Person and Tammy got married. The whole cast went to the wedding. It was held on the planet of Rick's other old friend, Squanchy. The location was beautiful. Rick gave a best man speech. Bird Person stood at the altar, in a suit, looking at his bride, and he was as close to smiling as a character like Bird Person can get. Tammy walked down the aisle in a white dress, carrying a pine cone instead of a bouquet, because in her wedding planning, she wanted everything to feel like her. Everybody clapped. The wedding went through. And then, during the reception, Tammy put down her drink and made an announcement to the entire room. She was not a high school girl. She was not Summer's friend. She was a deep cover agent for the Galactic Federation, the space government that Rick had been at war with for most of his life. Her entire identity, from the moment she had shown up at Rick's party in season Season 1 had been a lie. Her parents, who were also at the wedding, were revealed to be robots. Her childhood, her school, her crush on Bird Person, every single piece of her had been engineered by the Federation to get her into a room with Rick's best friend on the day of his wedding in front of every known rebel the Federation had been hunting for decades. The wedding itself was a trap. She pulled a weapon out from under the flowers. The Federation troops she had smuggled in swarmed the hall. Rick's closest allies, assembled in one place for the first time in years, were rounded up. And Tammy, still in her wedding dress, turned to Bird Person, the man she had just exchanged vows with, the man who had just promised to love her forever, and she shot him in the chest multiple times. Bird Person went down in front of Rick. He died at the altar he had just gotten married at, murdered by the woman whose hand he was holding 60 seconds earlier. And the way the show plays this scene is almost quiet. There is no big speech, there is no dramatic score. Tammy fires, Bird Person falls, and the chaos of the wedding turns into a full gunfight around his body. Rick barely has time to react. He scoops up his family and runs. The Smith family flees the planet. Bird Person's body is left behind on the altar floor, with his bride standing over him, reloading. For most shows, that is where the character's story ends. A tragic death at the end of a big season finale. A reason for Rick to go on a revenge tour in the next season. The Federation had other plans. At the very start of Season 3, in a short scene tucked into the end of another episode, the show cuts to a Federation laboratory. Tammy is there, out of her wedding dress, in a military uniform now. She is standing over a table. On the table is Bird Person's corpse. Except, he is not a corpse anymore. The Federation has been working on him. They have attached machinery to his body. They have replaced parts of him with metal. They have installed wires where his nerves used to be. And when Tammy gives the command, the body on the table opens its eyes, sits up, and speaks in Bird Person's voice. It is not Bird Person. Not really. The Federation has wiped his personality out. They have turned him into a weapon. They have renamed him Phoenix Person because he rose from the dead, and because they think that is clever. Phoenix Person works for the Federation now. He follows Tammy around. He does what she says. His memories of Rick, of Squanchy, of his old life, of fighting against the very organization he now serves, have been locked away by the machines in his brain. And this is the form Bird Person exists in for almost all of Seasons 3 and 4. A metal puppet of himself. A living trophy his murderer uses to fly around the galaxy. In the Season 4 finale, the same episode where the two Beths meet, there is also a fight between Rick and Phoenix Person. Rick wins, barely. Phoenix Person is defeated in the middle of the Smith family's driveway. Rick, exhausted, drags the unconscious body into the garage and starts taking it apart. He pulls out the metal pieces. He stacks the body behind his workbench. He stores his best friend's corpse in his storage area like it is a broken lawnmower. That is where Bird Person sits for a long time on the show, in pieces, behind a shelf. In Rick's garage. In Season 5, Episode 8, in an episode called Rickternal Friendshine of the Spotless Mort, the show finally comes back to him. Rick waits until his family is out of the house. Then he walks into the garage, pulls Bird Person's pieces off the shelf, and starts putting him back together. He rebuilds the body, removes the Federation parts, and hooks himself into Bird Person's mind using a machine so he can go inside Bird Person's head and wake him up from within. What Rick finds inside Bird Person's mind is one of the saddest things the show has ever shown. Bird Person, inside his own head, has given up. He does not want to be saved. He is sitting with a memory of Tammy, the kind version of Tammy, the version he remembers from before the betrayal, and he is choosing to live inside that memory because it is the only place he still has her. He knows the memory is a lie. He knows Tammy killed him. He knows she was never real, and he is choosing the lie anyway because the truth is too much. He tells Rick, flatly, that he already died at his wedding. He is just waiting for the rest of his body to catch up. Rick argues with him. Rick, who has spent his whole life telling Morty that nothing matters, spends this entire episode inside his best friend's head trying to talk him into living. And there is a memory, one Rick stumbles into by accident, way inside Bird Person's brain, that gives the episode its real weight. In the memory, a much younger Rick is standing in front of Bird Person. The younger Rick is nervous. He is trying to tell Bird Person something important. He is telling him that he has feelings for him. The words are vague. The memory is blurred. But what is clear is that Rick, once, a long time ago, loved Bird Person in a way that was more than friendship. And Bird Person, in the memory, pushes him away, gently but firmly. Rick never recovered from that either. The reason Bird Person is Rick's only friend is that Bird Person is the only person Rick ever told the truth to, and the truth got rejected. Inside the Mind episode, Rick eventually finds the thing that makes Bird Person want to live again. Deep in the buried memories, the ones the Federation locked away, way is a baby. Bird Person and Tammy had a child, a daughter, a half-human, half-bird little girl. The Federation took her. They are holding her in one of their prisons. Bird Person had never known she existed until Rick found the memory. When he sees her face for the first time, he decides to come back. Rick wakes him up. Bird Person leaves the garage in his original body for the first time in years. He goes off to find his kid. But the episode gives us one more cut. At the very end, we see that daughter. She is in a prison cafeteria. She is eating alone. She is a teenager. Other prisoners try to pick a fight with her. She puts them down one by one with the exact fighting style of her father, and she is hauled off to solitary as the screen fades. She grew up in a Federation prison because her mother betrayed her father, and her father was turned into a cyborg slave. Her entire childhood is the leftover damage from a wedding her parents had years ago. And Rick, who spent the whole episode inside his best friend's head, comes out of it having done exactly what Rick always does. He withheld. When he found out about the daughter, he did not tell Bird Person right away. He waited. He waited until he was in mortal danger inside the mind machine and needed a reason for Bird Person to keep fighting. Then he used the baby as leverage. Bird Person, once he is out and alive again, calls Rick out on it. He asks Rick directly whether there was a moment where Rick knew about the child and chose not to tell him. Rick does not deny it. Bird Person says calmly that it is fair enough. He walks away to find his daughter. He does not say goodbye. That is the pattern. Rick finds somebody he actually loves. He hurts them, or fails them, or uses them. They leave. He puts their pieces on a shelf in the garage. He waits a few years. Then he goes back to work on the body. And if this is what Rick does to the one person in the universe he actually cared about, if this is what his best friend gets, a murder at the altar, a metal prison, a long storage period behind a workbench, and finally a rushed goodbye in a driveway, then you start to understand what the rest of Rick's life looks like from the inside. You start to understand why he drinks the way he drinks. You start to understand why he sits in his garage alone for hours. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And you start to understand why one specific night in season 2, a long time before we knew any of this, back when Bird Person was still alive, back when the Citadel was still standing, back when Diane's name had not even been said on screen yet, Rick sat down at his workbench, built a machine, and quietly tried to use it on himself. Section 9. Autoerotic Assimilation. Rick's on-screen suicide attempt. There is a rule most animated comedies follow, even when they pretend they don't. You can go dark, you can get weird, you can kill characters and make the audience cry, but when the credits roll, you have to give them an out. A joke, a hug, a little smile on the way to the commercial break. Something that says, hey, it was heavy, but we are all going to be okay. Rick and Morty breaks a lot of rules, but season 2, episode 3, the episode called Autoerotic Assimilation, is the one where the show looked the rule dead in the eye and refused to follow it. The episode ends on a note so bleak, so quiet, so emotionally honest, that a lot of viewers, the first time they watched it, actually thought something had gone wrong with their stream. They kept waiting for the joke. The joke never came. The episode itself, on the surface, is mostly a comedy. Rick and the two grandkids are flying through space, and they pick up a distress call from an abandoned ship. They board it. They find the crew all assimilated, meaning their minds have been taken over by a hive mind, one consciousness controlling many bodies. The hive mind speaks, and when it speaks, it recognizes Rick. In a tone that the show plays for a laugh, the hive mind, which is calling itself Unity, tells Rick that it is an ex-girlfriend of his. An ex-girlfriend that is also an entire population of bodies speaking in one voice. Rick, unfazed, says hello, and the rest of the crew, the ones who have not been assimilated yet, watch as Rick flirts with the 1,000-person consciousness that is about to absorb them. Unity assimilates the rest of them, and then Rick, Morty, and Summer follow Unity down to the planet it is currently taking over. A planet where Unity is in the middle of absorbing an entire species into its single, shared mind. Rick and Unity immediately pick up where they left off. This means a lot of sex. The show is very clear about this. Rick asks Unity to assimilate, for example, a stadium of redheads for him. Unity obliges. At one point, Rick asks Unity to assimilate a giraffe. Unity obliges. The visuals the episode briefly flashes at you during this montage are as unhinged as anything the show has ever done. Rick is having the best week of his life, in the most Rick way possible. In a way that is supposed to be funny on the surface, but that sits wrong the more you sit with it. Because Unity is made of people. Thousands of people. None of them chose to be there. None of them can say no. Rick is not having a good time with one partner. He is having a good time with a species that has no choice in the matter, and he does not seem to notice or care. Meanwhile, Unity is trying to do something real on this planet. It is trying to lift an entire race of beings out of poverty, out of crime, out of cruelty, by assimilating them into its single consciousness. It has done this before, many times, on many planets. Its pitch, early in the episode, is genuinely compelling. Unity is not a villain, exactly. It is something more complicated. It believes that war and suffering and greed all come from the fact that people are separated from each other. If you could make everybody one person, all of that would end. And from its point of view, it is not enslaving populations, it is saving them from themselves. Summer, watching all of this, hates it. She calls Unity a conqueror. She says a hive mind is just a dictator with extra steps. Summer tries, across the episode, to break Unity's hold on some of the planet's population, to make them their own individuals again. And when she succeeds in a small area, the freed population immediately starts screaming at each other about the color of their nipples and beating each other up in the street. A race war breaks out in the neighborhood Summer freed. Humans, given their free will back by a teenage girl, immediately start tearing each other apart. And Summer, watching the consequences of her own moral argument, has to sit with the fact that she might have been wrong. That is the B plot. It is thoughtful, it is funny, it is the kind of thing the show is good at. The A plot is about Rick, and the A plot is what breaks your heart. As Rick and Unity party harder and harder, as Rick gets Unity to cross more and more lines, to carpet bomb a town on a whim, to cancel any plans Unity had for running the planet responsibly, to just be chaos with him for a while, something shifts. Unity starts to slip. Its grip on the assimilated population starts to crack. Not because Summer is rebelling, because Rick is pulling Unity down with him. The same thing that is happening to the planet, the crime, the addiction, the selfishness, the splitting apart, is happening inside Unity. Unity is getting worse at being Unity, because Rick is a bad influence on whoever he is near. Unity notices. Unity is smart. Unity is, technically, a civilization that shares a single mind. It understands very quickly exactly what is happening to it. And Unity makes a choice. Rick walks out of a bedroom at one point looking for Unity and discovers that the entire planet has gone quiet. Every assimilated person has stopped moving. Unity has pulled out of their bodies. All across the planet, people are waking up as individuals again, confused, remembering years they did not live. And on the wall of the room Rick is standing in, Unity has left a letter. The letter is not cruel. It is not dramatic. It is the kind of letter you write to somebody when you love them, but you have realized that the two of you together are worse than the two of you apart. Unity tells Rick in the letter that it has to leave him, not because it does not care about him, because it does. Because when they are together, Unity becomes exactly what Rick is, and that is not somebody Unity wants to be. Unity says that Rick is, in some strange way, better at what Unity does than Unity itself is. That Rick also turns everyone around him into copies of himself, into drunks and cynics and fragile people. But Rick does it without even needing a hive mind. He does it just by being in the room. Unity is calling Rick out, not with anger, with resignation. And Unity is saying, plainly, that Rick is going to destroy every person he gets close to if they stay near him. And it cannot be one of those people anymore. Rick reads the letter. He says nothing. The camera lingers on him reading it, and the show, for a second, just watches his face. Then Rick takes Morty and Summer home. The kids go to bed, or go back to their rooms, or go about their night, and Rick walks into his garage. This is the part of the episode that a lot of people do not remember clearly, because it is so quiet that your brain almost refuses to hold on to it. There is no music at first. Rick sits down at his workbench. He starts assembling a machine. Specifically, he starts assembling a death ray, a gun powerful enough to vaporize a living creature into nothing. He works on it slowly. His hands are steady. He is not crying. He is not talking to himself. He is just doing the work. Then, he unlocks a freezer at the back of the garage. Inside the freezer is a creature. The episode has been hinting at this creature all along. It is some kind of mutant. The show strongly implies, though it never confirms, that it is a Cronenberg, one of the mutated people from the planet Rick destroyed with Morty back in season 1. Rick pulls the creature out of the freezer. It is alive. It is suffering. It is crying out in a voice that is somewhere between human and animal. Rick carries it into the middle of the garage. He does not make a joke. He does not insult it. He leans down, and in a voice that nobody else in the house can hear, he speaks softly to the suffering creature. He comforts it. He tells it gently that it is going to be okay. And then he lifts the death ray and vaporizes it. It is a mercy killing. He has been keeping this creature in a freezer because he could not bring himself to do it. And tonight, after the Unity letter, he can. And then, still alone in the garage, Rick turns the death ray around. He sets it up on its stand. He points it at his own head. He starts the countdown on the machine. The music comes in for the first time. A song song by Chaos called Do You Feel It, which is a soft, slow, sad song about reaching the end of something. Rick sits in front of the death ray. He waits for it to fire. He closes his eyes. He passes out. He has been drinking all episode. He is exhausted. He is heartbroken, and his body gives out on him before the machine can do its job. The camera pulls back slowly. Rick is slumped in his chair. The death ray sits there, powered down, still pointed at the spot his head used to be. The episode ends with a wide shot of the garage in the morning light. Jerry is out in the driveway, cheerfully whacking weeds with a weed whacker, completely unaware that his father-in-law spent the night in the next room trying to end his own life. Credits roll. No joke, no hug, no button. That is how the episode ends. The show never mentions this scene again. That is the part that is hardest to carry. Rick attempts to die on screen, in plain view of the audience, in a scene that is shot with the seriousness of a scene from a prestige drama. And then the next episode begins and nobody in the family notices. Nobody in the family knows. Rick wakes up the next day and goes on another adventure with Morty, and nothing changes. Because Rick did not tell anyone what he was doing. Because Rick was never going to tell anyone what he was doing. Because the whole idea of this scene, the whole point of it, is that Rick is alone inside his own life. And the version of Rick the rest of the world sees is a performance. And underneath the performance is a man who sat in a garage one night and set up a machine to kill himself over an ex-girlfriend and passed out. And the machine did not do the job, and he just had to wake up and keep going. There is something else this scene quietly tells you. Rick was keeping that mutant in the freezer. That mutant was alive and suffering, and Rick was not putting it out of its misery. He was keeping it. He was storing it. The same way, years later, he will store Bird Person's broken body on a shelf in the same garage. The same way he kept a version of Diane alive as an artificial intelligence in his old house back in the Prime Dimension, just to hear her voice. The same way he kept Simple Rick alive, technically not him, but a version of him, in a chair in the Citadel factory, frozen in one memory forever. Rick cannot let the people he loves die. Not all the way. He keeps pieces of them. He keeps them in freezers, on shelves, on brain loops, in letters. He is a man whose entire worldview is supposed to be that nothing matters, and his garage is a museum of things he could not throw away. And then, that one night, he tried to put himself in the museum too. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the version of Rick we have been watching is only one specific copy of him, standing in only one specific garage. And if there is one thing this show has taught us, again and again, it is that copies of people can be made, that characters can be swapped, that families can be duplicated. And the last great secret of Rick and Morty is that at some point, the show made Rick face exactly that. Not one clone of someone, not two, but an entire country of Smith family copies, hunting each other across the United States, until nobody, not even the writers, could say for sure which family walked away from the ending. Section 10. The Decoy Family Horror. Nobody knows which Smiths are real. Every story about copies eventually has to ask the same question. If you make a perfect duplicate of a person, same memories, same face, same thoughts, same love for the same people, and that duplicate is indistinguishable from the original, does it matter which one you are looking at? Most shows that ask this question pick a side. Either the copy is real, because what is a person if not the sum of their memories, or the copy is fake, because the original is the one that came from the original. Pick one, move on. Rick and Morty answered the question in a different way, in one specific episode. The show made dozens of perfect copies of the Smith family, let them loose, watch them kill each other, and then, at the end, refused to tell you which one survived. The episode is called Mortiplicity, Season 5, Episode 2, and it is one of the hardest episodes of the show to actually describe, because it does not follow a story the way normal episodes do. It follows a virus. Every time you think you understand what is happening, the rules change under your feet, and by the end, your understanding of who the main characters of the show even are has been quietly demolished. Here is how it starts. The Smith family is eating breakfast. It is a normal morning in the Smith kitchen. Beth is talking about something. Jerry is making bad food. Morty and Summer are in their usual spots. Rick is ignoring everyone. The scene looks like the opening of any other Rick and Morty episode. And then, with no warning, a group of squid-shaped aliens burst through the wall with guns and shoot every single member of the family in the head. Bang, 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 bang. All 5 of them dead. The camera holds on the corpses for a second. Then it cuts to another house. It looks exactly like the Smith house. At the table sits a Rick, a Morty, a Summer, a Beth, and a Jerry. They are all eating breakfast. A beeper on Rick's wrist goes off. He looks at it, and he tells the family, calmly, that a decoy family was just killed. This is the reveal. Rick explains for the first time that after everything that has happened to the Smiths, the Federation War, the space assassins, the fact that every single alien in the galaxy seems to want him dead, he started building decoy families, robotic copies of himself and of every other member of his family. He placed these decoy families in houses around the country, all of them identical to the real Smith house, all of them set up to eat breakfast at the same time, all of them there to act as bait. If somebody wants to kill Rick, they have a much harder time figuring out which Rick to actually kill. The decoys absorb the hits. The real family stays safe. This Rick, the one sitting at the kitchen table with his family right now, tells his family all of this, and the family is a little unnerved, but Rick is reassuring. The decoys, he explains, are not a problem. They do their job, they die. The real family stays alive. Then, without much warning, the squid aliens burst through this house's wall too, and this family is also gunned down at the table. Cut to another house, another Smith family, another Rick getting a beeper alert, another panic conversation, another attack, another massacre. This is where the episode stops being something you can keep track of in a normal way, because here is the twist, and it is the twist that everything else in the episode is built on. The decoys were too well built. They were built to be perfect copies of the real Smiths, which means when the decoys thought they were the real Smiths, they were not pretending. They actually believed it. They had Rick's memories. They had Rick's knowledge. They had Rick's paranoia. And crucially, they had Rick's idea about how to protect his family. Every one of those decoy Ricks, at some point in his life, made decoy families of his own. The decoys made decoys, and those decoys made decoys. Each of them thought they were the original. Each of them built copies of themselves to protect themselves, the way the original Rick had. And so, by the time the episode actually starts, there are not 5 or 10 Smith families out there. There are dozens. There are maybe hundreds, spread out across the country, across different houses, across different lives. A whole hidden population of Smith families, all identical, all eating breakfast at the same time, all of them convinced they are the real one. Then, the squid aliens showed up and started killing them, and each time a decoy family died, the Rick who had built them got an alert on his beeper and realized, to his horror, that the family he had been protecting had just been wiped out, which meant he was the real one, and he had to run. So that Rick would pack up his family, hop in the car, and try to flee, until another group of squid aliens would show up and kill them. Cut to another house, another Rick, another beeper, another massacre. The episode sits in this loop for a while, and every time you think you are finally watching the real family, another set of aliens arrives to prove you wrong. It becomes impossible to care about any single Smith family because they are all going to die, and you cannot tell one from the next. And then Morty, in one of these families, notices something horrifying. He walks past a closet, he opens it, and there are decoys inside. More decoys. The decoy family has been making their own decoys. Morty looks at his decoy father, his decoy grandfather, his decoy mother, his decoy sister, and realizes that this whole family, the one he is part of, the one he has been eating breakfast with, is also a copy. The Ricks in the episode start to panic. Each one realizes that he might be a decoy. And the way the show handles this is one of the most quietly disturbing things it has ever put on screen. When a Rick realizes he is a decoy, he does not become sad. He does not grieve. He does something much darker. He realizes that if he is a decoy, then the other decoys, the ones nearby, the ones his original self built, are a threat to him. If the other decoys figure out that he is also a decoy, they will kill him to protect the secret of which one of them is the real one. So the decoys start hunting each other. Rick hunting Rick, Morty hunting Morty, Beth hunting Beth, all of them identical, all of them convinced they are the original, all of them willing to kill their own copies, because the only way to be sure you are real is to make sure everybody else is dead. The squid aliens, by the way, are also a problem, but the squid aliens stop being the main danger pretty quickly. The main danger becomes the Smith families themselves, an entire country full of families, all claiming to be the Smiths, all at war with each other. The episode shows a rolling series of attacks, one Smith family breaking into another Smith family's house and shooting them at the dinner table, one Smith family disguising themselves as squid aliens to trick another Smith family, one Smith family luring other Smith families into a gathering by sending out a signal, and then opening fire on the crowd when they all show up. And in the middle of this bloodbath, the show slips in something even worse. Some of the decoys are badly made. The quality went down with every copy. And one family we meet late in the episode is a family of scarecrows, rough, crude, ugly copies stitched together out of fabric and wood, with faces that do not quite work. These scarecrow Smiths are self-aware. They know they are fakes, and the way they cope with that is by catching other decoy families, the nicer looking ones, and peeling the skin off their bodies so the scarecrows can wear it themselves. Skin graft copies, decoys wearing the faces of of better decoys. A Rick in a scarecrow body zipping up the face of another Rick over his own. This is a children's cartoon, by the way, on Adult Swim. By the end of the episode, after what looks like hundreds of Smith families have killed each other across the country, we cut to one remaining Smith family in a car. Rick, Beth, Jerry, Morty, Summer. They are driving. They are exhausted. They are quiet. And Rick's beeper has gone silent for the first time. There are no more decoys pinging him. The alerts have stopped. Rick, in the car, tells the family that they are safe now. The decoys are all dead. They are the only Smiths left. And the episode cuts to space, where a completely different Smith family has been hanging out off camera with Space Beth. And Rick, on that ship, gets an alert that his decoys have all been killed on Earth and realizes, to his shock, that he is the real one. But wait, there have been dozens of Ricks across this episode who thought they were the real one. Every single one of them was convinced, for sure, that they had the original memories and the original family and the original life. Every single one of them was wrong, except one. The show gives us a Rick at the end who seems to be the real one because he is the one who survived. But the show has also already proven to us by this point that the feeling of being the real one means nothing. Every decoy Rick had that feeling. Every decoy Rick was wrong. There is no test. There is no checksum. There is nothing anyone inside the episode can do to prove which family made it to the credits. The show does not even try to tell us. The last real Smith family is real because the writers say so, and that is the only reason. Which means, if you are paying attention, the entire rest of Rick and Morty, from Mortiplicity onward, is a show about a family that may not even be the family we thought we were watching before the episode. The family that crawls out of Mortiplicity alive might not be the same family that walked into it. There is no way to prove otherwise. The show has now officially admitted that it does not care. Whoever shows up in the next episode is the Smiths. That is all. And then, because Mortiplicity is not a show that knows when to stop, the episode ends with one more beat. One specific decoy. A badly made wooden Jerry with a grandfather clock mechanism where his heart should be, hid from the whole battle and survived it. Just him. One lonely wooden Jerry, standing in a forest after all the other Smith families have finished killing each other. And because he is made of wood and cannot actually die, the episode fast forwards through the next several thousand years of his life. Beavers find him and build him into a dam. The humans die off. A new species of animal people evolves and takes over the planet. They find the wooden Jerry in the dam. They burn him down to just a face. Cowboys eventually replace them. The cowboys find the burnt face of Jerry and, because this is Rick and Morty, they crucify him above a yellow alien version of Jesus Christ. Wooden Jerry is still conscious through all of this. He never dies. The episode ends on his face, nailed to a cross, staring at eternity. That is the ending. The decoy we are supposed to feel least bad about, the wooden copy of Jerry, the least real version of the least respected Smith, is the one the episode condemns to immortal suffering. And when you line this up with everything else in this video, a pattern appears. Rick keeps copies of people he cannot let go of. The Citadel keeps Simple Rick plugged into a chair to make cookies. The Federation keeps Bird Person's body running as a slave. Rick made a fake version of Diane just to hear her voice. Beth might be living as a clone, or might have left and replaced herself, and either way, the woman on the couch is performing a role she may not technically belong in. The whole show is a machine for producing copies of people and then refusing to let those copies rest. And Wooden Jerry, on his cross at the end of Mortiplicity, is just the most honest version of it. A duplicate nobody chose to make, kept alive forever by accident, long after everything he was supposed to be a copy of is gone. That is the secret underneath all the secrets of Rick and Morty. The show is not really about a grandfather and his grandson going on adventures. It is about a man who is terrified of losing the people he loves, so he keeps building machines to hold on to them. Portals, clones, decoys, cyborgs, memory loops, artificial intelligences, dimensions full of fake families, and every single one of those machines ends up being its own kind of prison. For Diane, for Beth, for Morty, for Bird Person, for Tommy, for Simple Rick, for Evil Morty, for the decoys, and, most of all, for Rick himself. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.